Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Manchester is Red podcast. The Manchester is Red on tour. I was going to say we're in Bilbao, but that's not technically true. We are in the Basque Country, shall we say. We're in San Sebastián. I'm Tyrone Marshall, joined from my hotel room by Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, how are we?
I hope people aren't watching this on YouTube. I'd very much recommend people listen to this one because the lighting is not exactly cinematic in here, and I look like a midget really, and you're towering above me because our chairs aren't on the same level. But yes, I'm very well. Obviously, we've got here via 2 flights and. You're very smooth driving in our mini automatic from Bilbao to San Sebastian. I was worried earlier when you said we're not sharing a room, are we? And I approached the hotel reception with bated breath, but we're not sharing a room. At least I think this is the first time we've done one of these since San Diego. It
would have been, yeah. It's been a while, hasn't it? But no, yes. The setup is interesting. I mean, looking at the camera that I can see on screen now, it does look like I brought someone on work experience with the Europa League Final. But I can assure you it is just the chair set up in this room. And yes, thankfully we do have separate rooms, given we're going to be here for a while. It was an early start for us this morning, flying via Mallorca from Liverpool. Thankfully it went pretty smoothly. There was a few United fans on the flight from Mallorca to Bilbao, but like I say, the journey was smooth, and it feels like the invasion's going to start tomorrow, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, we said that it's probably good for us, at least, that we've come out here on Monday rather than tomorrow, which will be hectic. Bilbao Airport is tiny. I've spoken to friends who've done previous trips to San Sebastian or Bilbao, and it's tiny even when you've just got a couple of thousand United supporters there. So to have tens of thousands coming over, I think United and Tottenham's followings among the best away followings, travelling followings in the UK as well. So with that on top of it, hopefully the whole event, the occasion, it passes without incident. There's not really a lot of needle between United and Spurs fans. I think there's a reasonable amount of respect between them, if anything. You can never be too sure, unfortunately, when you come on these trips. I mean, when I was staying in Bilbao a few weeks ago, on the day of the game, there was like gating outside our hotel, and riot police at the end of the road checking where are you going and things like that. And you think, is this really necessary? And obviously, you're very polite and professional in those circumstances. But a friend who was staying even nearer the stadium, and I was only about a 5-minute walk away, he said that he had to wait for a route to be plotted for the English fans, the United fans to get to the stadium. So there is still that element of, I mean, it's a weird form of discrimination really against English football fans, when I think it was our colleague Paul Hurst said when it was San Sebastian in March, the local newspaper said about how more riot police had been brought in ahead of Manchester United's arrival, and then the final paragraph, it just said on their previous 2 trips to San Sebastian there were no arrests. So it's not really. It was a story, but it was a non-story there, and of course it's going to be very different over the coming days with this influx of Londoners and Mancunians. But I think we're all pretty reasonably confident that it will pass without incident, and hopefully the Bilbao riot police also accept that there are going to be certain behavioural traits of English football fans, but as long as they're not crossing the line, there's no action that requires to be taken.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully common sense will prevail with that. I mean, it's going to be a fascinating week off the pitch, isn't it? In that it's it's a great city. San Sebastian's a great city. It's a beautiful part of the world. The drive that we just had from Bilbao to San Sebastian was very scenic.
Yep.
The city is, for the final it's ended up with, it's probably too small, isn't it? And we know of colleagues who are staying in San Sebastian, in Santander, some in Vitoria. Yeah. I'm sure there's United fans who are staying all over the Basque Country and looking to get in and out of Bilbao. Hotel rooms in Bilbao, even after the first leg of that semi-final, were £1,000 a night plus. It's going to be a chaotic week, I think, isn't it, for a lot of United fans and a lot of Tottenham fans trying to get around, not just Bilbao, but around the whole Basque Country and in and out of Bilbao.
Yeah, someone I know is staying in a farmhouse. I think that's about £800 a night, and that was a reasonable deal. They thought they're a Tottenham fan, so that they don't want to miss this occasion. I mean, it's strange when you speak about Spurs in that context, because you think, crikey, when was the last time Tottenham had a European final? But of course, they're the Champions League final only 6 years ago, which was obviously a bigger event because it's the Champions League. But this one does feel extremely consequential because it's two really big English clubs, big followings. They've had their worst seasons domestically since they were both relegated in the 70s, United in 74, Spurs in 77. Spurs are success starved. It would be pretty monumental for them to win a first trophy since 2008. United, they're one of their worst teams in 34 years. Last season won a trophy. So you wouldn't be surprised if they still got over the line. But I agree. I mean, in terms of the logistics of coming here, I think someone from United said to us or reminded us that Bilbao has only got this final because it was due to host European Championship games when they were spread across the continent in 2021, which of course was delayed a year by COVID. And there was a particular outbreak in Bilbao, which meant that the Spanish ground was redesignated in Seville, I think it was. Not Sevilla Stadium, I think it was the other stadium there, maybe the one that hosted the UEFA Cup final when Celtic got there in 2003. And in essence, it sounds great because the stadium is brilliant. The Athletic Bilbao fans call it a cathedral, which may be pushing it, given that it's a relative new build, but it is on the same site, I believe. I didn't go to the old one. It's, the facilities are great. It's a beautiful city. It's very rare that you go to a Spanish city for the football and you think, this isn't all that cool. I've not had that. You went to Villarreal, which sounds a different experience, I think, to going to Seville or Madrid or Barcelona. But with Bilbao, it sounds great in essence. But of course, then you consider the logistics. There was even some issue, I was told, where United had a meeting with UEFA about the landing slots for Tuesday for United and for Tottenham, because the airport is just not geared up for a huge invasion or influx of supporters. And unfortunately for the people of Bilbao, it's not a Bodo Glimt Athletic Bilbao final. It's pretty much from their perspective, the worst case scenario. I suppose if there were two clubs from Germany, that might be a bit different, but as I said earlier, where English football fans are still stereotyped and there's still that hangover from the hooliganism era of the 70s and the 80s, particularly, of course, some of the incidents that happened in the 80s as well, that people can't erase from their memory, and they still struggle to look at them through a completely different prism. That's why, probably from their perspective, it is a worst case scenario. And of course, the difficulty of getting here, I didn't realise how difficult it was to get to Bilbao. I mean, it's felt like with a lot of these trips this season, we've gone around the houses to Lyon. I mean, Manchester Airport is, we all know how bad it is anyway. It is getting a little bit better. The new terminal, Terminal 2, there are plans for to upgrade Terminal 3 as well. But for such a big city airport, it feels like there is such a lack of direct flights when you need them. Now, it's not the case with Bilbao because the demand is there and the dynamic pricing is also there. But people are going to go around the houses because it's cheaper. I mean, in Liverpool Airport, there was a United fan who was walking around with a green gold shirt on, which was even at that time of the morning, still quite brave, given that the first shop you get to in John Lennon Airport just seemed to be all Champions 2025 merchandise there. But of course, you see him and you think, well, there's only one place he's going, and he's not going to New York on holiday. He's going to be connecting there to get to Bilbao, and that's why there are a lot of these indirect flights and connecting flights that are going on. Mallorca Airport earlier, it was a strange experience because we were almost at the exit, leaving the building. Then you obviously pointed in the direction of a lift that's just surreptitiously tucked away, and there are the other gates to get to other destinations. But it's not an obvious. I said it's not an obvious connecting flight, and these trips are extremely expensive, especially for football supporters. We're in a privileged position of doing this for work, so it's different for us. But I mean, a friend of mine, he's very optimistic. He's already booked a refundable hotel for Budapest next year for the Champions League final. United fans, so, and he'd already done that at the start of this season for this final. Some colleagues had as well, and there's absolute merit in that because the prices have just gone. They are ridiculously high, and you think, how do they sleep at night? But this has been going on for decades and decades. So everyone has to put up with it. And rather naively, I'd got tickets for the cricket Trent Bridge on Friday, thinking if United do somehow get to the Europa League final, it's in Spain, no problem, get back in plenty of time. Of course, it's really not that easy to get to Bilbao, even though it's not far from the French border whatsoever.
No, it's probably quicker to drive, actually.
It probably is. Yeah.
I imagine there's a lot of fans who will be driving and doing minibuses as well. I guess, like you said, the Athletic Bodo Glimt was probably the dream final for the locals, apart from the hoteliers and the bar owners who will be making a lot of money over the next couple of days. And the thing you always get with an English final, of course, is those fans that will come without tickets just to be part of the occasion, which you maybe not getting quite as much with other clubs. Obviously, each club have got 14,700 tickets. There'll be thousands more without, just to soak up the atmosphere. You mentioned United flying in tomorrow. Then what's their plans that we know of leading up to the final? Because obviously both clubs will be at San Mamés tomorrow. Both clubs, United certainly arriving tomorrow. I presume Tottenham are arriving tomorrow as well. So what do we know? What do we know of their plans?
United have got their final open training session at 10:30 at Carrington in the morning. Having done that lengthier open session at Carrington last week on that UEFA Media Day, which, if you've experienced it, and I don't mean this spitefully whatsoever, but once you've experienced it, you kind of hope the team you're covering never get to a European final ever again, or at least until the UEFA have addressed those Media Day protocols, because it was a much longer day than I think all of us anticipated. But United will be flying after that. Tottenham have their first go in terms of the press conferences tomorrow at about 4
p.m. I think, something like
that. And they have to do a walk around the stadium as well, which I remember from the Europa League final in Stockholm in 2017, because it was the only pre-match activity we had, in that United cancelled their press conference because of the attack on Manchester Arena on the Monday night. This, of course, was Tuesday evening, so their press conference was cancelled. They did conduct an open training session at Carrington that morning, but of course it was extremely somber atmosphere, and I think they held a minute's silence there. From memory, we were I think we got to Stockholm via in Frankfurt or Nuremberg, but it was a sobering day, but also it was quite surreal in that there were we didn't really do any work. There were no demands from our desk really to provide any coverage, because of course what had the barbaric scenes that had unfolded at the arena that evening. So come the day of the game, a little bit of normality was restored there, and I think everybody was quite keen to not move on as such, but welcomed the occasion, the event, to actually give a little bit of happiness to some people who are in unimaginably horrific circumstances. Fortunately, we're not in those circumstances on this occasion. And so United, I think, are due to have their press conference at 7:00 tomorrow night. I can't remember if the walk around is before or after it. I mean, for us, it's obviously it's about an hour's drive, or just over an hour from our hotel in San Sebastian to the San Mamés Stadium. So we'll be there for Andrew Postecoglou's press conference, and I believe he has to be flanked by, is it one or two players?
Two players, I think.
Two players. Which I remember when it was the Champions League final in 2008. I think it was Rio Ferdinand and Wes Brown who flanked Sir Alex Ferguson. So that's been going on for a long time. I don't quite understand the merit of having two of them there. I know it's a final and it's UEFA wanting their cake and eating it, but I think one would have sufficed. I mean, it's never ideal with United anyway, because the player is usually sat with the manager, and sometimes if the press officer, when he's going around the room, quite understandably, he will try and gauge whether you're going to ask a question for the player, because the player could just be sat there on his top, not actually saying anything. But trying to, I mean, we always try to do this guesswork as to who will speak, and I think Fernandes seems like a logical shout, given that he's the captain. I'm surprised how little media activity Casemiro has done, because United was certainly planning to put him up before one of the two Bilbao games. He's been a good story this season. It would have been ideal for that. I think, say he'd done pretty much Bilbao out here or in Manchester, I'd have certainly been keen to do a feature on it, because I think there's some interesting questions to put his way, and also even through a translator, he is actually a good talker from experience. He did a press conference in San Sebastian a couple of seasons ago alongside Eric Ten Hag, and even in mix zone as well, and this is going back more than 2 years. His English was decent enough then that he could understand our questions without having to have it translated. But the problem with that press conference last week was that it's like you're asking Rúben Amorim questions there about a European final, and then tomorrow we're going to ask him more questions about a European final. Like, I actually sympathise with him. He shouldn't have to do 2 pre-match press conferences just because Manchester United got to the final. That feels more like a punishment than a reward for getting 90 minutes away from winning a trophy. But all eyes, of course, tomorrow will be at Carrington. They'll be pilled on. Well, they might not even be fixated on them. Is Lenny Oro there? Is Matthias de Ligt there? And to be honest, I think Lenny Oro is the only one of the injured contingent who has got a chance of playing in the final. If indeed he is fit. But looking at his body language when he came off against West Ham, it did seem rather ominous. Yeah,
he felt it looked like he feared the worst, didn't it, on that occasion. I mean, let's rewind a few days. Then we were both in London on Friday night at Chelsea. Another defeat for United. I mean, did anything that happened there, did any of that team selection make you think differently about what team selection Amorim's going to make on Wednesday? Because it felt like that entire night was kind of discussed around, the context was this final, wasn't it? That was the only interest for it in United, really. Did anything that happened there, or the team he selected, change your mind about what he might do this week?
The team he selected could feasibly be the team he selects against Tottenham. And it will be interesting to see if he does go with an unchanged team, because although United were competitive for an hour, they still lost.
Yeah.
And they had one shot on target, was it, from Amad in the second half. They are such a toothless side in the Premier League. We spoke to Nusa Mazraoui last week, and that interview's been on the site since Sunday. And he was even though he's Morocco international, he was born in the Netherlands, and he does have that Dutch bluntness. And we asked him, why is the form so different between the Premier League and Europa League? And it's a question we've asked of Amorim and of Ugarte, and we've got various answers. Or in the case of Amorim, he said he just couldn't explain it. And Mazraoui said that in the Europa League, if we get 2 chances, we get 2 goals. In the Premier League, if we have 20 attempts at goal, we don't score. And on another occasion or another week, that might have been the top line, but it didn't feel quite appropriate going into a European final as a feature. But it was quite damning on the forwards. I mean, that's not Mazraoui digging out defenders or midfielders there. He's pointing the finger of blame at a couple of players, and I think there are a couple who obviously spring to mind. Looking at that team at Chelsea, it's such again, I go back to what a weird, fascinating, dicey dynamic this final is, in that the injuries almost balance themselves out on both sides. Tottenham are without two of their best attacking players. United could be without two of their first choice back three, excluding Martinez because he's been out since February. But ideally, going back to when the season restarted in April after the internationals, if United were to get to a final, Amorim would have hoped to have had Maguire, Yoro, and De Ligt available. And I think it feels like it's only going to be Maguire available. As you said, the prospect of Harry Maguire and Victor Lindelof starting in the Manchester United final in 2025 just encapsulates the decline that they've been mired in for several years. And that's not a slight on Maguire. He's done so well over the past 18 months. The fact of the matter is those two players last signed contracts with Manchester United in August and September of 2019. And there they are. And there they could be starting in the final. And the other guy next to them is someone, Luke Shaw, who signed in June 2014. Mm. There could be three survivors from the 2021 Europa League final: Fernandes, Shaw, and Lindelof. And again, it doesn't reflect well on United whatsoever. But looking ahead from that, the midfield switch up I thought was interesting in that there's a lot of chat that Tottenham will go with quite a conservative or compact midfield of Bissouma, Sarr and Bentancur. And maybe, as you said, that's convinced Amorim to take Ugarte out of the team because Casemiro is definitely starting this final. That was, we didn't need confirmation before Chelsea, but we got it when he was I think he was the first to come off. And Fernandes, I thought, was looking really good in that role until the season resumed against Forest, and he was back as the number 10. And look, wherever you play him, he'll have an impact. But maybe where Tottenham are shorn of two quite influential players, Amorim's decided, well, I've got to balance it out a little bit here. And of course, I think if he's got a midfield four of Dorgu, Casemiro, Ugarte, and Mazraoui, that's beyond conservative.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to say it's negative, in fact. And then if you've got Fernandes there, you can play the percentages a little bit more with the front three in that Mason Mount is not necessarily as swashbuckling a footballer as Alejandro Garnacho, but he's possibly what's right for United in that occasion in this game. And unfortunately for Garnacho, Amad's come back from injury at the right time for United, wrong time for Garnacho possibly. Mount's found a little bit of form and is certainly a prominent figure under Amorim, and we all know what Amorim has said about him in the past. So you can understand it. The one selection you can't understand, we understand it, and we also can't understand it, but he's playing by default is the striker.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I was thinking, because Brentford played yesterday, I think if you took Rasmus Højlund and you saw him at Atalanta, and I didn't, I haven't seen him now, he's the kind of player, with his profile, he should probably be the backup striker at Brentford because they sign Danish players.
Yeah.
And he might even be third in the pecking order. He was atrocious on Friday. And I've thought for a while that Amorim should have potentially experimented with a strikerless side, even though the system is just not geared up for that. It's all about servicing the striker. The problem is United have got a striker who, more often than not, he cannot score for toffee. And so it would be extremely drastic for him to come to the final day and just decide, do you know what, I'm going to take Højlund out of the team, I'm going to play Bruno Fernandes up there. It, of course, worked towards the end of last season for Erik ten Hag. They beat Newcastle, they beat Brighton, and they kept Højlund out of the starting 11 against City in the FA Cup final. And they had probably post-Ferguson's probably United's best performance. The season was riding on it. They were up against champions Manchester City. The manager's job was on the line, and to perform like that, it was watching Palace beat City at the weekend. As good as Palace were, they were not as good as United were last season. And Guardiola said afterwards that City, quite rightly, he said City were better against Palace than they were against United last season, which I'd agree with. But everyone knows that Højlund's going to get replaced in the summer, and he's not really risen to the challenge of trying to prove Amorim wrong or even create a market for himself where more clubs would look at him and think actually he's got more about him and maybe he could do a job for us. And it's just the United bubble that it's suffocating for players. But he's just so out of his depth, and that is a big problem for them, because I just do not really see him getting the better of Christian Romero and Mickey van de Ven. So then you're just reliant on Bruno Fernandes or Amad doing something, because it's been a season of the one-man bands who, in that Amad was United's best player until he got injured, and then Fernandes has just picked up the baton and regained the form that he's shown in previous seasons.
Yeah. Excuse me. I mean, like I say, Højlund is in the team in hope rather than expectation, isn't he? And given that, they need game changers, they need goal scorers, and that probably means Amad. I mean, he could play Amad and Garnacho. It feels like that's unlikely. And I think Amad is more of a threat than Garnacho at the moment. And you saw it on Friday night, really. He was, again, the one player that he was the one that looked like getting United back in the game. And it feels like, I think a couple of weeks ago, we were both pushing him to start at right wing back. That's almost certainly not going to happen now. But it feels like he needs to be in the team on Wednesday night, doesn't he, as that kind of X factor.
Yeah, that's not even up for debate. I think his impact when he came on against Brentford, more so when he came on against Athletic Bilbao. Whatever United's best team is this season, next season, he has to be in it. And Amorim has spoken before about getting him close to goal. So I think, although Amorim has used him as a winger quite a few times, maybe 5 or 6 times, his preference is for him to be as one of those two playmakers. And certainly looking ahead to next season, if they get Cunha in, which feels like it was a long time ago now, but it was only maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think it's got to the point already where people would be surprised if that doesn't happen. Yeah. You probably look at those two as the two number 10s behind a new striker, with Fernandes as back in midfield, where of course he has played a lot this season. But Amad is incisive, he's direct, he makes things happen. And Garnacho is a little bit more erratic. I think he's had a better season than some people have suggested, in that it's easy to forget, and I think a lot of people do forget that he's not even 21 yet. He doesn't turn 21 until July. He's played an awful lot of football. He's not got injured in more than 2 years, which is remarkable for a winger, and how vulnerable they are to injury. But he keeps on going. He never goes into hiding. He has had some big moments this season. He's not. I don't think, clearly he's not been at the level that he was last season. But it's a hell of a lot to expect that from the player. I think there was always going to be a bit of a lull, but maybe where at the start of the season he was among the goals and he actually had a pretty productive start. You were looking at it thinking you should be aiming for at least 15 goals, maybe a little bit more than that. But he did hit that trough. But then, as we saw in the second leg against Athletic Bilbao, that was his 14th successive start. So it would feel a little bit harsh on him to come out of the team. But the way it's going, it just feels inevitable. I mean, Mason Mount was one of the interviewees for the broadcasters last week, and I was surprised by that one, because he usually just doesn't talk at all, apart from to MUTV or Premier League productions, and that was progressive, because he should be speaking more. He's mature enough, and while we were waiting for Amad, we were listening in, but obviously courteously, and he was absolutely fine. There was no issue whatsoever there. So I don't know why it's taken him this long to do it, but he's got to carry that seniority, and I don't think he always has during his time at United. But the fact that United had him as one of the interviewees, and I know that the press officers don't know who's going to be starting. Obviously, it's not like Amorim's going to say, "Yeah, I'm going to start him," so you can put him up for interview. But they have a reasonable idea, and with Mount, he is quite a positive story at the moment, where he's come back into the team. He's had a couple of particularly good, certainly the second leg against Bilbao, very good impact. Got his first goal in more than a year at Brentford as well. He's been on an upward curve in the last few weeks, and as I said earlier, we spoke to Amad, we spoke to Mazraoui. Those two are going to start. Harry Maguire was another interviewee for the broadcasters, he's also going to start. So I think Casemiro did a bit of media work as well. Højlund, there's a picture of him with Owen Hargreaves. So you were never going to get a scenario where, I don't know, say Christian Eriksen was going to do a chat last week, or Toby Collier. So it's still a difficult one, because in terms of the team, in that I'd have liked it to have been, and would like, to try and accommodate Garnacho and Amad, but it feels like Garnacho's had the momentum drained from him. And also, regarding the game at Chelsea, he got done by Reece James for the goal, which it's not a disgrace. And I thought Reece James was possibly the man of the match. He was very, very good. And after Cucurella scores, Fernandes rounds on Garnacho, Harry Maguire does as well. Garnacho had been on the pitch less than 2 minutes. And maybe, Amorim disputed it, but I suggested that to him that maybe the substitutions where he's looking ahead, maybe that's Chelsea, which is very clinical at that point, and capitalising it. But the die had been cast, and that Reece James against Patrick Dorgu was just a one-sided battle. It wasn't even a battle. And I feel a bit sorry for Dorgu in that 2 different United regimes have signed 20-year-old Denmark internationals and thought that they were ready to be starters for Manchester United. And although Dorgu had a decent spell, he's had a really, really bad month, it feels like. I think he suffered from not having Diallo in the team, which may seem illogical in that one plays on one side, one plays on the other. But as a combination, they were actually starting to develop a decent balance, and that they were creating chances, those two, for United. And it's gone out the window, and Dorgu has ping-ponged from left wing to right wing. But again, we know that he's going to start in the team. Like when we were walking out of Stamford Bridge, Rich Jolly said 2 of the weakest players in that United side are the 2 most certain starters, Dorgu and Højlund.
Yeah, that is the reality of it. And it felt, I thought it felt timid at half time, that the consensus at half time was that they played all right there. They played some decent football, they've knocked it about all right. And you look at the stats, and they had 1 shot in the first half, which was when Mason Mount stretched to meet, might have been Dorgu's pullback, about 15 yards out, 16 yards out.
Ended up
near the corner flag. And that's, for a half of what we're saying is decent football, that's the only chance they've created. And it feels like that's going to play a big part on Wednesday night, doesn't it? Somehow they've been free scoring in Europe. This is a European game in Premier League clothing, I guess. And they need to prove that they can find the goals to go and win the game, because, like Mazraoui says, that in the Premier League, they rarely ever look like scoring. And whatever the reason is, in Europe, they've been free scoring, and it entirely depends which United turn up, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, and they've not scored against Tottenham in either of the league games this season. They've, of course, got 3 against them in that madcap match in the League Cup back in December. It does feel like they are banking a lot on Tottenham folding, or the occasion getting to Tottenham. I remember when Spurs got to the Champions League final in 2019, and the manner in which they got there was extraordinary, where I think they were 1-0 down the night and 2-0 down an aggregate, would it have been? Or it might have been.
Yeah, it was against Ajax. Yeah, they were 2-0 down an aggregate and needed to.
And they lost, sorry, they were they 3-0 down an aggregate? I think they were, because it was the away goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So 3-0 down an aggregate, and then, of course, Moura scores with final. Ajax were Lucas Moura left foot away from reaching the final. And just one of the most extraordinary ways to reach a European Cup final. And of course, Spurs are going to lap it up, because it's the first time they've ever done that. But I remember thinking at the time, when Spurs players congregates on the pitch and really savoured it, and Danny Rose was clutching a bottle of beer, and the night before, Liverpool had their own remarkable comeback against Barcelona, having lost the first leg 3-0, they won the second 4-0. And for Liverpool, as seismic as that victory would have been, they'd done that before in Europe. They did it in Istanbul in 2005. They did it against Borussia Dortmund in the Europa League. I can't quite remember what the scoreline was, but that was a comeback of sorts in 2016. The famous Sonetti endgame, would it have been 77 or 78 with David Fairclough as well. That is Liverpool. that was Liverpool that night. What they did, what Tottenham did wasn't. So for Liverpool, it's like it's not quite any other day, but it almost feels like any other day because they are accustomed to that, and the club is steeped in that. But for Tottenham, it wasn't. And I knew as soon as I saw Danny Rose with a beer bottle, I thought they've got no chance in the final whatsoever. And Liverpool had their number in the final. It was a complete non-event. I know it was 1-0 for a long, long time, but and of course Harry Kane wasn't fully fit either. But Spurs just were not in that final whatsoever, and that's the difference in mentalities of teams who are accustomed to going to a final and winning it, which United have done in recent years. And also there'll be some players, and Fernandes is the one who springs to mind, having lost a European final in 2021, he will be absolutely desperate to avoid that again against Tottenham. And as I said last week, apart from relegation, it probably doesn't get more humiliating than finishing 17th, which United could still end up there, and losing a final to Tottenham, because teams do not lose to Tottenham in finals. The last side to do so, it was Chelsea, okay, but they were managed by Avram Grant. So it's almost like there's an asterisk against it.
Yeah. I mean, what are you thinking going into this game? Then we spoke about it a bit last week at Carrington, and I think I was saying I just find it too hard to call. And you've got that balance of, like you said, that whole lads it's Tottenham thing, and the fact they don't win finals against United. Even last year, they do with a poor team after a poor season. They won it. Tottenham have won every game between the teams this year. I'm finding it really hard to call. You mentioned before how it's on a knife edge, and I mean both of these teams have been playing this Thursday night roulette for 2 or 3 months now, haven't they? Every Thursday night their season could end, and it doesn't. But for one of them, the season is going to end. Well, I mean, for both of them, the season's going to end on Wednesday night, isn't it? Because Sundays are total irrelevant, and it's easy to forget there is actually another Premier League game to come. But who do you think holds the balance of power going into what is such a high stakes game for the Europa League final?
It's like trying to solve a cipher. In looking at the injuries on both sides, you look at the form book between the teams and how Spurs haven't lost to United in 6 games, but then you look at the Baron Trophy cabinet at Spurs and the recent silverware that United have had, despite last season being their worst team in decades, until of course the team this season. And I'd be interested to see what I think the Tottenham team. It feels like 10 of the 11 starters are pretty much nailed on, but I'm just wondering who that third attacker is going to be for Spurs, because obviously Solanke will play, Son will play because he's come through his fitness tests effectively, the latest one being against Villa at the weekend. I'd imagine the smart move would be Brendan Johnson, who of course gave United a bit of a run around at Old Trafford earlier in the season. But Spurs aren't particularly sharp up the top end, and this is the strange thing. United, of course, are not sharp at the top end whatsoever with Højlund there. But in Amad and Fernandes, I think they've got more match winners in their team than Spurs. I don't look at Tottenham's team and think there's a player who can bail them out. Son used to be that player, but he's a borderline busted flush now. Yeah. He's been a brilliant player for them, and Spurs have done extremely well to have kept him for 10 years. I think it is nearly. He's looking at his career. He probably should have moved at some point. Looking at some of his teammates who moved on, Kyle Walker, obviously, Christian Eriksen did when they had that opportunity, but he's been extremely wedded to Spurs. And look, from Tottenham's perspective, it would be an extraordinary story if someone was to summon up one final great impact or performance to win them a trophy, because of course he's not won a trophy there in 10 years. So we could debate it all day and look at the strengths and weaknesses until kick-off on Wednesday evening. I think it's maybe just 50, like the Brexit referendum outcome. it's maybe 51-49 United's favour, just because I think that Amad and Fernandes, where there's no Kulusevski and Maddison as well, I think that's where United have the edge on them. I don't necessarily think United will field a demonstrably better team than Tottenham, because as I said, you look at Van der Ven and Romero, you look at Tottenham's fullbacks, their keeper, I think they've got the edge on United in all of those areas. Midfield, okay, Fernandes is playing there, it's different. Attacking wise, United, I think we've got the edge because there's no Kulusevski and Maddison, but United have got the weaker striker. And again, you think one team's got an advantage, but then there's a caveat to it, and it's going to be very easy for both managers to frame it really positively for their dressing rooms, I think, and to try and put them in the mindset of why this is their time, why they should feel confident of winning the game. So I think it is really 51-49 in terms of just how tight it is, and that's reflected in the table as well. The Premier League table, they're 116th, 117th. They probably finish non-identical positions in the Europa League table as well, because of course they both finish in the top 8 to qualify automatically for the round of 16. So I think it was Riath in the Daily Mail. He described it as the Donkey Derby. And I think that's a very apt description for it.
Yes, definitely. It's going to be it's a fascinating game, isn't it? It's just with what's riding on it and that prospect of some kind of salvation to a season and balm to a season. And like we say, for whoever loses, it is going to be agony at the end of this week. But that is all for now. We're off to.
I suppose it would be remiss of us to mention. Watching the FA Cup final at the weekend. There aren't, I think, FA Cup finals. So many of them in recent years. I've watched them. And certainly there was one I actually fell asleep during, but I was actually envious not to be at that one on Saturday. What was it like?
It was fantastic. I mean, the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. We were, you'll know there's kind of two sections to the press box at Wembley, and you're kind of either in one end or the other, and we were up towards the Palace fans. So, the noise they were making was astonishing. At kick-off, our colleague Simon Bukowski turned to me and said something, and I genuinely couldn't hear what he said. I had to ask him a couple of times to repeat what he'd said and lean my ear in.
Transplanted to Istanbul or something.
Yeah, it was so loud. And yeah, I mean, I think, you mentioned it before, so much goodwill to cup winners. And
yeah,
obviously a huge disappointing day for City. No one listening to this podcast is really going to care about that.
I don't think so.
But I think everyone apart from City fans felt that it was a great team to win the FA Cup. I think they've got really likeable players. They've got a likeable manager. The only bad thing about Crystal Palace is where their stadium's located.
Yeah, they really need to move away from Croydon.
If they could move away from there and make it easier to get to, they'd have a lot of things going for them. So, no, I thought they deserved to win. It was, like I say, a fantastic atmosphere. And, yeah, come that, we were booked on the last train back, we made it with 5 minutes to spare. So, I think come that added time, just keeping my fingers crossed that there wasn't going to be an equaliser in extra time, because I think that would have been disastrous. And had I stayed another night in London and then got that 4 a.m. alarm this morning, I don't think my wife would have been too happy. So thankfully we made it back. But no, nice to do the first cup final of a busy week and one more to come. And like we said, probably even more riding on this one, isn't it? It is just such a fascinating game given the seasons both have had. But that's all for now. We're off to have a look around San Sebastian. There's grey clouds outside the hotel room window. It was chucking it down with rain on the drive. Drive from Bilbao to San Sebastian.
It was Mancunian weather, wasn't it?
It was. That's the first rain I've seen in 4 weeks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's brighter tomorrow and the day of the final.
That's right. So yeah, hopefully there'll be good weather for all those fans coming over. But we'll have more content for you during the week from Bilbao and from San Sebastian. We'll be at the press conferences, Tottenham and United tomorrow. We'll be in Bilbao bringing you the scenes around the city as well. So stay tuned to the MEN. Stay tuned to our podcast feed. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel. Go and visit the website. We'll have everything you need from Bilbao over the next few days. For now, thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.